and thank you for having me on here. And we all know as dietitians, right, our goal is always to help our patients identify their trigger food and their level of tolerance so that we can expand their diet. And we know that that is ultimately the key to having better gut microbiome, better gut function. So, but with IBS patients, right, we do have to maybe go through the low FODMAP diet in full swing or maybe do the FODMAP gentle diets. And this tool is to really walk you through how to approach different patients differently. Because for some patients, it's beneficial for them to go through the full low FODMAP diets, but for some patients, the FODMAP gentle approach may be enough, or maybe it's all we need to do with them. All right, so we definitely want to do a nutrition history, an assessment of have they done the low FODMAP diet before, what kind of GI symptoms they have, does it warrant us to go with the low FODMAP diet. So if they have done the low FODMAP diet before, well, let's go through one that have not done the low FODMAP diet before. Did we market this right? Has implemented the low FODMAP diet to identify food triggers? Then no, we go this way. So if they've not done the low FODMAP diet before, then we look at their diet and look at what FODMAP foods they're eating, what symptoms do they have. If we think that some of the foods that they are eating that are triggering symptoms, then we can suggest maybe trialing a low FODMAP diet. However, for those of us that are dietitians, your patients might already be coming to you with the recommendations to trial the low FODMAP diets before we even suggest it. So, but the nutrition history is important here to see if they've done it before, what have they done? Did they do it appropriately or not? So if we think that an indication, there is indication of trialing the low FODMAP diet, then that's what we will do. If they have symptom onset after eating FODMAP foods, 4 to 8 hours after consuming the foods. Now, some of the FODMAP triggers like the polyols or the lactose or even fructose, they do happen a bit sooner than that. So that's where we come in and think about, well, is their reaction related to the fermentables, or is the reaction related to the ones that draws water into our small intestine? Because those would maybe happen a little sooner than 4 to 8 hours, but most of the time we want to look at symptoms that happened in about 4 to 8 hours, or maybe even longer than that by the time the food gets to the colon. Now, when low FODMAP diet is contraindicated is when a patient may have a history of eating disorder, or they are already on a very restrictive diet, or they may not be able to implement the low FODMAP diet. Then in those cases, we could trial FODZYME directly and see if they have a symptom improvement. Or we could go about the FODMAP gentle approach, where we cherry pick some of the higher FODMAP foods, removed it from their diet. So just looking at their diet and say, maybe instead of eating a lot of garlic with your meals, how about we replace it with some lower FODMAP condiments or seasonings, such as scallions or, well, oil, garlic infused oil that are lower FODMAP but still give you all those flavors. So we could recommend switching foods around to help them remove certain higher FODMAP foods, but still, going lower FODMAP and still manage their symptom better. And then we do the FODMAP challenge and then identify their FODMAP triggers and or level of tolerance. Now, if they don't have any contraindications, then we just go do the full FODMAP elimination and then with reintroduction, which is a lot more straightforward. But again, it's not always suitable for everyone, especially for people who have a history of disordered eating or eating disorder. And for those of us working in the GI field, disordered eating is what we will probably see a lot. Now, if they don't have a tendency of eating disorder, then you can still trial a full FODMAP elimination with them. But that will be your judgment on what to do. And sometimes the best way to trial things is actually just trialing FODZYME to give them more confidence first. Now, for those of our clients whom we can go through with the reintroduction and we identify their triggers, if the triggers are fructan, GOS, or lactose, then this will give us an indication that trialing FODZYME again with them is appropriate in those cases. Okay, let's see. Now, I want to go back up to nutrition history here. So we have one arrow that says yes to the low FODMAP phase. So even if a patient has went through low FODMAP diets before on their own, we still want to ask a lot about their low FODMAP trialing history. What did they do? How did they do it? Were they actually implementing low FODMAP correctly? So as dietitians, sometimes we really need to go back and dig into how did the patient go through the low FODMAP phases? How did they reintroduce food? Did they do it appropriately, or they were just guessing and trialing it out themselves? So sometimes, even if a patient tells us that they've done low FODMAP diet before, we still want to maybe revisit and trial and see if we want to do it again. And oftentimes in those cases, we would go with the FODMAP gentle approach instead of the full-blown FODMAP elimination and reintroduction approach to speed up the process. Okay. So I think that's it for this slide. If you guys have any question at all, you can drop it in the chat and we'll talk more about it. And I'm going to share a couple case study here where we worked with a client on identifying their food triggers. So this is Jennifer, actually one of our previous group coaching clients, where she had IBS-C, significant chronic constipation, and then she also had a lot of bloating, pain, and visceral sensitivity, which is very typical of IBS patients, just a lot of pain and discomfort in their abdominal area. So she went to her GI, and the GI recommended to trial the low FODMAP diet. And she actually bought cookbooks from other dietitians and do the low FODMAP diet by herself, and she did it for 1 whole year. And she did not know how to reintroduce food, and she actually didn't have a lot of symptom relief. And we know going low FODMAP can help relieve some of the bloating. But if we don't resolve the constipation, the symptom will persist. It's always going to be there. So when we worked together, we dug into, how she did the low FODMAP diet. What did she do right? What did she do wrong? And how we can help her, guide her to do it properly. And once we did it properly and also worked on using other tools to help improve her gut motility, we were able to bring her symptom down to baseline and then do FODMAP reintroductions as soon as possible, because again, she's been doing low FODMAP for a whole year by herself without success, right? So this is where us as dietitians can be really helpful in assessing whether a patients have done it properly or not, and how to help them correct it and really get them to symptom baseline. And when we reintroduced the FODMAPs, she had actually very high intolerance of GOS and a slight intolerance to fructans. So when we did the beans challenge, that's when she reacted pretty quickly and couldn't even tolerate smaller amounts or smaller portions of the beans. With fructans, she could tolerate small amounts, but not at the higher quantities. So she was a good candidate to trial FODZYME, and that's what we recommended. Just like, let's give it a try anytime you're eating things that may be higher in GOS or fructan, so that it helped her open up her diet and eat more food without fear, because we know a lot of GI patients, they are afraid of eating. If there's any tools that can help them bring the symptom down or give them more confidence to eat more foods, that's what we always welcome. And FODZYME is a really useful tool in that sense. Okay, and let's talk about our next case. All right, so we just talked about an IBS-C case. Now let's talk more of an IBS-D cases, which of course that's when they are really, when people have diarrhea, uncontrolled diarrhea, especially, they're really honing down on their diets and removing a lot of food from their diets by themselves sometimes. Now this is actually Jessica. Jessica had a lot of IBS diarrhea, significant food fear. She worked with a provider that basically put her on multiple protocols, multiple elimination diets in the past, and nothing really worked consistently. When we did our dietary assessment, in cases like this, we know that she would benefit from the low FODMAP diets, but we didn't want her to go through the full low FODMAP diets because she already had a lot of food fear. And this is where we recommended the FODMAP gentle approach. And we looked at her diet and suggested alternative on things that we would like her to switch around so that she doesn't have to go into a very extremely, well, not very, Not extremely, but very restrictive diet again, because it wasn't necessary. Now, if she wasn't improving, we might have gone a little bit stricter, but she was improving pretty quickly after we cherry picked some of the FODMAPs to remove from her diet. And then we did FODMAP reintroduction pretty quickly. And it turns out that she was actually lactose intolerant and she couldn't tolerate onion at larger quantities, and some of the other fructans as well. And again, she would be someone that is a good candidate to trial FODZYME at the end to see if it can help her improve her symptoms when she's eating things that may be higher in lactose or higher in fructan, because we know fructan is in a lot of things. Lactose is a bit easier to avoid, but then fructan is a bit harder to avoid. So this was another case that we trialed FODZYME to really help her, give her more confidence. And again, for patients who have a lot of food fear to begin with, sometimes you may not want to go through any more elimination with them. And in those cases, you can start trialing FODZYME before recommending them to add more food, because that way it can help give them more confidence to trialing those foods. And unfortunately, in our space, there are a lot of patients just who have a lot of food fear, and any tools that can help them expand is a good tool to trial. And FODZYME, of course, is one that has evidence backing to it, unlike a lot of the other enzymes on the market. So we, as dietitians, we want to be careful what we recommend. Okay, I think that's both of our case studies here.